In today's episode, we're discussing what got you to pick up the mandolin the first time. For all of us, there has been one moment when we actually put our hands at the very first time to this instrument. I remember when it happened to me, and in this episode, we're going to hear what the community has to say about it.
Hey there, music makers. I'm Hayes Griffin.
I'm Magnus Sedlund.
And welcome to the Mandolin Secrets Podcast, a show where we take a deeper look at what's happening in the world of mandolin secrets. Each episode, we're going to tackle our questions of the week, unpack the latest mandolin secrets lessons, and answer your questions about mandolin, guitar, and all things music. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing what got you to pick up the mandolin for the first time. Like Magnus said in the intro there, that's a pretty special moment for a lot of people, and you've probably got something to say about it in the community. But before we dive into this week's discussion, be sure to head to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast to sign up for reminders about our upcoming episodes. If you can't tune in, never fear, just search Mandolin Secrets Podcast on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to get updates when we release a new episode.
Yes, and there's also another question coming to the community. We asked them, is music a social activity for you, or do you just play by yourself? And this is actually a thing that I'm thinking for myself today, because I don't know what you are saying, Hayes, but I mean, it can be a bit lonely being a content creator. Couldn't it be?
Oh man. This is one of my favorite categories of YouTube videos to watch these days, is like content creators talking about how lonely it is to be a content creator. Have you seen this?
Well, I haven't watched that video for a long time, but I'm not surprised there is videos like that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and I mean, especially for someone like you and me, that is also, we're used to doing music, I mean, with other people. Like playing shows, doing rehearsals and all that. And being a content creator is very different from that. And I mean, so the question was, is music a social activity for you? Well, for you and me, I know it's not only social activity, it's even our work or professional, or what you can call it. But still, I'm sometimes really missing that part, the social activity, especially when I'm here in the studio preparing all the lessons and doing all these kind of things. And well, I'm going to tie into that soon, but what in the videos you're talking about, is there any like theme, or how do people treat this lonely feeling coming out of?
Yeah, it's really interesting what a lot of folks talk about, because I think a lot of content creators are trying to relate this to burnout. There's a lot of, I guess, activities surrounding people being content creators, not having the social aspect that they did in their profession or their chosen niche, like you and I are talking about. So it's like they take their favorite thing in the world, and then they isolate themselves in a studio, and they work to create all this content. And then after a while, they miss that original kind of spark that got them into that like niche, and they burn out. They stop creating and doing all that stuff. So that's kind of like the theme that I noticed. But to kind of speak to what you were saying a minute ago, I got involved in music initially as a social activity. It was like, I took private guitar lessons and all that kind of stuff, but my teacher pretty quickly put me into a band with some of his other private students to kind of like learn how to interact with each other socially. And I've talked a million times about my best friend Jacob, right? The guy that, fixes all my instruments and all that stuff. That's how he and I met, was in that group.
Okay.
So
long time ago then.
Yeah, it was like, I think we determined I was like 14 maybe when that happened. But as time goes on, music became less of a social activity for me, kind of like you're talking about. Like now I'm I'm sitting in the basement. I'm like, oh, I have to practice this thing by myself just to make a video for it. It's not like I'm going to go jam with Magnus or Jacob on this tune that I'm working on. It's yeah, which is kind of interesting to think about.
Yes, absolutely. I'm interested to hear for the responses from some of the people in the community. But I can just so here's my way of tackling this as a content creator, because I recently also invited people to my studio to record the content with them. And I think it really comes from when you were here visiting me and we were playing. Then it's double the fun, really, doing it together.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to. There's actually, to be very precise, it's 6 Swedish fiddle tunes that I'm preparing and I'm about to record. And I just thought, no, I don't just record these tunes myself. I'm going to invite one of my favorite fiddle players. A friend of me is coming here and I'm recording this with her instead. So, and hopefully this is also, I think it will add something for the content so that the community, the listeners, the viewers will pick up some good vibes from.
Absolutely. And I know you're great about this stuff already in terms of maintaining a work-life balance, but if you create those opportunities to jam with your buddies in the midst of working, you're not going to burn out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I even felt like it felt good for me reaching out to her, offering her an opportunity for work.
Yeah.
to drop by, and I could even see her appreciating it. So I think that's also like one of the pros about being a content creator, that we can actually get other people involved in it. But enough talk about me, and what are some answers from the community?
Yeah, there's kind of interesting varied stuff, most people, when I saw in our community, they weren't specifically talking about the music that they play on like mandolin and stuff like that. So it's like, but like Gail from the community says, I sing with a group a cappella. I would love to find a jam group to play mandolin with. How do I do that? So one of her, it's like there's an interest in playing mandolin socially with people, but mandolin, we've talked about this, it's kind of a niche instrument a little bit, so it may be harder. And then Jane says the same thing here. She says, many years ago, I used to run a choir, but now I play for myself along with my backing tracks and accompaniment. So it's almost like singing is like this really social thing for people, you know what I mean? But there's like some difficulty or some kind of barrier between like playing an instrument with other people, I almost see in the community.
And the way I'm picking up the most of people in our community is there's very few like professional players. There's like semi-professional maybe, but I guess in one way or another, I think the social activity is kind of tied into our way of making music. I think even, that's the reason why people are listening to the podcast like this. That's the reason why people are joining us in the academy, in the guitar club. It's for being a part of something that is bigger than yourself. And it makes music and life better.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the people here that are saying like that they play for themselves or play by themselves mostly, Jane and a few other folks make reference to the fact that they play with backing tracks. And think about that, like a backing track is just kind of like a computer representation of playing with a group of people,
Yeah.
So like they're still working on this skill,
Absolutely. And it's even like in some situations they're playing with us, a recorded version of of us playing. So
exactly,
it's difficult to isolate music from any kind of social thing, but it's still it is a valid question.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's kind of interesting, right? Like, even Joan here, I'm looking at another answer in the community. She says that she I have always loved playing just by myself, and often it's a form of meditation and quiet personal time for me. That's really cool. But then she goes on to say that she also plays in nursing homes and things like that to help, like, spread some joy to like elderly people and stuff like that. So that's pretty.
Yeah. That's a very nice way of using your music skills, right?
Yeah,
Playing at a
agreed.
nursery home or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I also think I'm reading the question or do you just play by yourself? And at the same time, everything I just said, still the best time of my day is when I'm having my like little practice session with myself, sort of.
Yeah, same.
But but still, I mean, I guess it's also the way that my own playing the mandolin by myself, it supports this kind of the when we're involved in music making with others. So
yeah, absolutely. You have to practice by yourself in order to be able to,
that is,
link up with people socially.
Exactly. Yeah, so a complex question. It looked very simple from the very, but it's a lot of depth in it.
Yeah,
I guess. So let's move on to the second question we have, and that is on what got you to pick up the mandolin the first time? What got you to pick up, the mandolin the first time? Anything from the community that stands out right there?
Yeah, there were some funny answers. Nathan says, I was tired of lugging an upright bass around for 25 years.
Oh, there's a really good reason right there.
Yeah, much smaller form factor in the mandolin. So I thought that was fun. Steve says that he heard Shady Grove by Jerry Garcia and David Grisman, and that was one of the things that got him to pick it up for the first time. So that's, pretty legendary kind of recording. And then I thought was another funny answer. This is actually kind of why I picked up the mandolin. But Willard in the Facebook community says the reason he decided to pick up mandolin was that he was going to a jam with 16 people and 12 of them were guitar players.
I can relate to that a lot, actually.
That's right. Well, you and me, we started as guitar players, right?
Yeah.
So like it's no mistake that we relate to that kind of answer.
No. And for me, it wasn't that the reason that made me pick it up the first time, maybe. But I tell you, that's the reason why I kept playing it. Mm-hmm. Because I just felt there was a space for me playing mandolin beside all these guitars. And
I think that's more related to my answer, too. It's interesting. Well, because you could use your skills from guitar to probably gain pretty reasonable fluency on it, right?
Yeah, straight away, and not even that I was like surrounded by many guitars, but in any situation I played, there was another guitar or string player, and the mandolin it sits very well along with another like low pitched fretted stringed instruments, I would say.
Agreed.
And this is sorry.
No, I just said agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. No, but this, so what got me to pick up the mandolin the first time, this was, I think I might have shared this story with some of you before, but at this time I was 19 years old and I started to do concerts. This time I was playing with a singer and we were doing, a gig like every weekend or so. And I needed a guitar with an internal microphone. At least I thought I needed one. So I was checking, and I also knew what I wanted, sort of. And I was checking like the something similar to, in the newspaper they were selling things, And I went there to look at this guitar, And this guy, it was a decent guitar, and I actually bought it. But he said, "I'm selling this because I'm gonna buy a mandola." He said. Excuse me, what did you say? A mandola? Never knew what. Well, it's quite kind of similar to the Irish bouzouki. Have you heard the Irish bouzouki? No, I never heard it. I said, and he brought it out. He had this hanging on the wall, and Irish bouzouki, always like an octave mandolin, and he played this for me, like play a few tunes. I was mesmerized. So I just thought it sounded so cool, and he said it's kind of like a big mandolin. He said, and I was like, okay. So I left from this guy with this new guitar, but I wanted to play that other instrument that he was playing. And then, just 2 weeks later, in the same newspaper, someone was selling a mandolin for $60. And here it is. So I went there to this woman and bought that from her, an old, like, very, I must say, very simple mandolin from the 50s. And I knew nothing about it other than what I just heard this guy when he was playing it. So I think my only kind of reference for the mandolin, it was watching like the Disney movie Lady and the Tramp. Yeah. And there is the chefs are playing some accordion and mandolin. That was kind of my. So I mean I could like mimic the tremolo from the very start, because I thought that's how the mandolin should sound, sort of. But it's been a quite interesting.
That's a great way into the mandolin. I don't think. I love hearing people's discovery phase for this instrument, because, like, for you didn't even really know what it was, But then the first time you kind of see or hear about one, it's like, I have to figure out that thing, right? Like,
yes, and I also feel it's like a coincidence almost.
Yeah.
If I, from that point when he was showing me those instruments, if I have stumbled on an Irish bouzouki or a mandola or an octave mandolin, I would probably have picked up that instrument first, and there had been a probably longer way for me going to the mandolin, sort of. So it was almost like a coincidence, yeah, but I'm very grateful for that happening.
Yeah. Well, thanks to whoever that guy was that showed you what a bouzouki was.
Never met him before or after that day. And I kind of kept my eyes out, because there aren't that many like Irish bouzouki players, but he seemed to have disappeared.
That seems eerie to me, dude. Maybe he was like a wizard or something like that,
Yeah, you never know.
Time traveler. He was like, he had to go back to that point in time just to make sure that Magnus picked up the mandolin, or otherwise the world was going to end,
I sometimes have referred to it as I felt like the mandolin found me and not the other way around. And I'm not sure.
That's
but
great,
I guess for you it was different. You have been, playing bluegrass guitar in this circus. You've seen the mandolin quite a while.
Yeah, it was my buddy Jacob. Well, my teacher John, who taught me in Jacob, was probably the first person I saw play a mandolin. Yeah. And it was funny with John because he was a guitar teacher, so he had like one of these old Fender F-style mandolins. It was like a, cheaper instrument or whatever. And he would tune it like the top 4 strings of a guitar.
So that's brilliant.
Yeah, right. So he could use all of his guitar. He didn't have to like learn how to play the mandolin,
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. But then he actually got some
like a ukulele, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been exactly like a ukulele, only not tuned up a fourth, right? Like just like the top. Yeah. Like. But that's great, right? Like that was my first exposure to it, and then Jacob started taking lessons with him, and he's started doing like real mandolin stuff in GDAE tuning, you know.
Okay, yeah.
And then Jacob and I got together in jamming when we were teenagers, and it's natural. Like if I'm the guitar player and he's the mandolin player, at some point we're going to be like, "Hey, man, let's switch and see what happens," you know.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first exposure to a mandolin being in my hands and like playing one. We learned the tune. The Girl I Left Behind Me. That's still like one of the only actual flat pick tunes that Jacob can play on the guitar, and it was the first one that I learned to play on the mandolin. But but then it was like beyond that, it was like 14 years or 12 years before I started before I bought my own mandolin and started taking it seriously and all this kind of stuff. I was in my mid 20s, I would say, when I started taking mandolin seriously.
Yeah, and was that because of like the electric mandolin, or
yes.
was Tiny more before or after your serious period of mandolin playing?
He was the catalyst for my serious period on the mandolin, because I heard this is still like one of the few breaks that I have of Tiny's that's memorized like fully in my mind, but I heard the tune I'll Have Somebody Else by Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, and Tiny takes one of the most ripping mandolin solos I've ever heard in my entire life on that tune. And I was like, I thought it was, you know, like most people, I thought it was guitar at first, but I was like, wow, that guitar player's playing like all above the 12th fret. Like, how does that work out, you know? But I figured out, because Bob shouts out in the middle of that, you know, the biggest little instrument in the world, mandolin.
You know? Right after the solo, or
yeah, like in the middle of it, you know. So I was like, "Oh my god, that's a mandolin with a pickup on it," you know. So yeah, Jacob had an extra mandolin at that point in time. It was an early 20s Gibson A4, like one of those oval hole. Okay. So I took that on the road when I was with April Virch, and just started transcribing a bunch of Tiny Moore and learning a bunch of traditional fiddle tunes, and it was off to the races from there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I remember you played. You played mandolin the first time I met you. But it's and well, you played really well at that point, so it must have been way into this journey then.
I'd say maybe a year or two into that journey, because like at that point, it was fun to go to Sweden and travel in Europe because I could blend in a little better over with you guys. Like when I pulled the mandolin out at American festivals, I didn't know like 50 bluegrass tunes on the mandolin. I knew like 10. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was you caught me in the middle of my growth spurt.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Did we ever talk about like any well, yes, we talked about some of the community answers from what got them to pick up the mandolin, but was there anything more to add to it?
Yeah, just a bunch of varied cool answers, and some you would expect, right? You know, like one of them was hearing the Dillards in the 80s, and I see a lot of Old and in the Way out there as kind of like the genesis for picking up a mandolin. Old and in the Way. Yeah,
but it's like the Grisman and Garcia thing. They hear something and they wanna, what is that instrument? I wanna try it, sort of.
Yeah. It's cool to hear all those responses, you know, because like a lot of them, like where I grew up, it's like, well, my dad used to play a bunch of Bill Monroe records, you know what I mean? So it's like that's kind of like standard response, but it's cool to hear people come in through these like peripheral areas to bluegrass and stuff, you know.
Yeah. Maybe more an easier entry point for someone that didn't grow up with it, sort of.
Absolutely, I would say.
It's the same thing for me with Swedish folk also, that I was first drawn into it from bands doing more like a crossover thing, and then eventually went deeper into traditional stuff. But that's for another episode, I guess, going into
exactly.
Yes, I think I want to just say thanks to to everyone listening to this podcast. We are looking forward to coming up with a new episode in a number of weeks. And something you want to add before wrapping it up, Hayes?
No, just that we'll be back in a little bit with another episode. But in the meantime, head to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast for more information on how to keep up with the show.
Yes, and also you find us in our Facebook group. So please, if you want to connect with us, you can find us in there. And remember, until the next time, always as usual, be a music maker.